This video is being put together for the 3D BIM deliverable that is part of the I-80-I-380 interchange project in Iowa. I'll be given an overview of Bentley View, which is a free piece of software that can be used to navigate and extract the necessary information from the model. On the DOT's website, you'll find a link to both the model and the informational document that gives instructions to downloading Bentley View. We will start by opening up that website. At the time of the video, the location of the model was on the Iowa DOT's Office of Contracts website under current notices. You can see there's a quick start guide as well as a zip file containing the model. So if we open up the quick start guide, you can see there are links to Bentley View and where to download that piece of software. So it is a free download. Just click on the download now and it'll give you further instructions. By clicking on the download zip folder, there will be a pop-up on the bottom of your screen asking you to save it. And we've already done that. So we'll go to our desktop where I've saved the zip file, and this is what you're going to see. Once you get this downloaded, go ahead and extract all, and it should open up a second folder here with all the files that are accessible. So now that we're in the actual folder structure, the directory with all the files, we're going to talk about each file or what the files are used for. The only thing you really have to concern yourself with is this first file, the file I have selected here, which is the 520.00355 420 model. Every other file in here is supplemental to that file, and you really don't need to access it through the Windows file directory. It can all be accessed through the model itself, with the exception of these first three documents. There's a README file, which if we open that up, it gives, again, the same description I'm telling you, which file to be used. It talks about what the other files are, which are mostly links within the model. And we also do have materials for visualization. So for aesthetic purposes, and just to get the model looking a little bit better, we have applied materials to each element in the model. And in order to get those to show up, we need to copy these two folders, the Bentley material patterns and visualization, to our C drive. So if we copy these and go to our C drive, we'll paste them directly into our C drive, which I've already done. And you can see here we have visualization, and here we have the Bentley material patterns. So now that that's done, we're ready to open up Bentley View and go through a tutorial of Bentley View. So the icon for Bentley View looks like this, kind of an eye. So we just double click here. Now the first thing you're going to get is it's searching for a project-wise connection, which most of you probably will not have. Go ahead and cancel that out. And it's going to open up your Windows file structure. So we'll go ahead and navigate to the folder with the model in it, which is the 420i model. And here you can see only the three files that are readable with Bentley View show up. So we'll go ahead and open up the file we talked about. And it's important to note that Bentley View is only able to open up those three files. It's a .i.dgn or a .dgn file. So opening Bentley View for the first time, this is what the model is going to look like. You can see we have tools across the top and a few things on the bottom. Then we'll go through kind of all of these. The first thing I want to do is make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page with the tools that we have available and that we have turned on. So I'm going to go through how to turn all of those tools on. First thing we want to do is go to the Tools menu, drop down, and turn on our primary tools. And you can see here that you get a floating tools dialog, which we can dock by simply dragging it up to the top of our screen. We also have a toolbox in the Windows views. And actually that one was already on. So we'll go ahead and leave that one on. We're going to want to turn on our snap toolbox. So if we left click on this little icon down here, this half circle, we go to button bar. We'll select our button bar, and again, you can see the pop-up. Let's go ahead and dock that up top as well. And lastly, we'll go ahead and turn on our view control, view rotation, and we'll open up all these as a single toolbox. We do have one more. It's called AccuDraw, which is it just allows the user to control their dimensioning and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about that a little later. But the way to access that, there's a couple ways to access that. You can either hit F11, which you can see here, the AccuDraw box was brought up. Or if I exit out of there, you can also key in AccuDraw activate. I've had some issues in the past. Either F11 isn't available on laptops or sometimes it doesn't pop up. So this is a surefire way to get that toolbox to pop up. So we simply hit enter once AccuDraw activate is entered. And then we'll go ahead and we'll dock this one down on the bottom. And you can see we have the XYZ coordinates. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the view windows. Here you can see we have 3 view windows that are highlighted here, and we'll go ahead and turn those off to show you what they are. So basically, we're viewing the model through one of the view windows. There are also other view windows that you can turn on and actually see the model from a different angle while still viewing it in a different view window from a different angle. So I typically don't use the multiple views simultaneously. So for the purposes of this demonstration video, we're only going to look at one view window. So go ahead and make sure that all of these are grayed out. In terms of the view groups, we don't use it, so don't worry about view groups. We don't have any set up for this model. So for navigating the model, there are a couple of different tools that I want to go through. The first one here, the waving hand, is the pan view. And it's important to note, if you highlight or if you hover over some of these tools, it's going to give you a description of the tool. So be sure to follow those. So we'll go ahead and select the pan. And if we hold our left button down on the mouse, you can see we can drag the view around. If you have a scroller on your mouse, we can zoom in and out of the model with the mouse. We also have a view rotation tool. So once I select that, you can see there's a crosshair that pops up. Now this crosshair defines the center of rotation as you're rotating around the model. So it's really critical that this be placed at the right location that you're interested in. Sometimes if this point is out in space, let's say it's over here somewhere, and I try to rotate around the end of the bridge, it's going to be difficult because it's going to want to rotate around that point. So to make your life easier, if you're looking at this pier 5A, for example, we're going to simply drag it over, and then you can see these little snaps pop up, and we'll talk about those later, but you'll want to snap to some point on that pier, and you can see it makes the rotation about that pier a lot easier. And I'm going to go ahead and actually go to a different view here. So let me open up something so we don't have the ground surface interfering with what we're trying to show here. And I'll talk about this shortly. Let's go to our bridge ISO. There you go. So here you can see our model with a lot of the supplemental, the ground surface, the utilities, the borings are all turned off. So again, go ahead and drag that crosshair to whatever you need to rotate about, snap, and rotate. So I'm rotating by holding the left mouse key or mouse button and rotating as I do that. We also have different views set up, so we can simply go to the top view. We can go to a front view of the model, right view, and so on and so forth, an isometric view. Now, if you, let's say I click on top view and I'm rotating around. So let's go over to rotation and I want to rotate around. And I want to get back to the top view or whatever view I was on previously. There are view previous and view next. So let's say we wanted to view that previous view. It's going to undo those views. And that's really all it does is brings you to the previous view. It doesn't do anything else. It's kind of like an undo button on any other program. So next I'm going to talk about the Project Explorer, which I actually just opened up. And in order to get to that, we'll go to the File, drop down, Project Explorer. And to show you again how I dock that. Again, it's floating around. And as I hold my left button and kind of move it around, you can see there's two little arrows on the side here. And when I kind of hover over them, it shows kind of a grayed out area. And that's just allowing me to dock that menu off to the side. And it automatically resizes the view window when you initially do it. And we can drag that over to kind of make it a little bit bigger. So there's three different tabs up here at the top of the Project Explorer. So the first is the Model tab. This is where you're going to see all of the levels that are in the model. And let me rotate here to get back to a good view, isometric view of the model. So this model is actually a federated file, which is basically a clean file without any elements in it. And what you're seeing here are two references that are included in the file itself. So if we drop down each of these references, you can see a bunch of levels within each reference. The first one is OBM, which is basically refers to Open Bridge Modeler, which is one piece of software we use to create the model. And the second is called PS, which stands for Pro Structures, which is the second piece of software we use to create it. So different elements had to be created in the two different pieces of software. So if we look through OBM, for example, you can see all of our girders, our terrain, our utilities, and borings are all included in OBM. Within the Pro Structures reference, there are a lot more detail elements, all the rebar, all the concrete, with the exception of the deck and haunch and barriers. We have ITS conduit, granular backfill, and you can kind of just look through these for yourself. Splash basins. So in order to turn these off, each individual level, the best way to do that, and we'll do a level that's a little more obvious here. So we'll go ahead and turn off the deck concrete. So we'll simply just uncheck or check that. And sometimes it does lag a little bit. It won't automatically update the view. So there's a couple of ways to force the update. You can either zoom in or out with your scroll bar, or you can go up here and hit the refresh button. So here you can see it didn't it did lag a little bit, but sometimes it'll stay on. Just simply go up here and hit the refresh button and it should update to whatever levels you have turned on and off. So we do have some sort of a structure to the way we leveled these items. Here you can see steel section 1 and A refers to obviously the steel section, section 1 of our girders. That's field section 1 and girder A. Um, we have girder B. We have each of the bays, so all the cross frames within each bay, 1, 2, and 3. And that goes on for each of the 5 field sections that we have. We've broken down our utilities to the type of utility it is, going into Pro Structures. We've broken down the concrete on the piers and abutments. So the abutment, you can see we have back wall, footing, we have piles. We've also broken up the rebar to match the typical 2D plan set deliverable for the Iowa DOT. So this is what you would typically see on a 2D plan set. Now this isn't going to match the bar marks that are actually provided in the model due to software limitations, but it still gives you a good way to turn off different sections of the pier reinforcing to allow you to see it more clearly. Just scrolling through here again, you can see each pier is broken down individually, pier 5A or pier 6A, pier 7A, the abutment. And then we also have a few features from the Pro Structures side of things that had to be modeled on the girders. So you can see the steel section 2 kind of matches what we were looking at in OBM. These are actually the bolts. So bay 1, bay 2, bay 3 are actually the bolts in the cross frames in each of those bays. So that's the level structure that we use to set up the model. And really that's kind of everything that you need to know within the model tab. The next tab we're going to take a look at is the views tab. So in order to assist the contractor with viewing or getting around the model quickly, we've set up a lot of views, save views to help facilitate that. So what a save view is basically it saves the position of your camera and the levels that are turned on or off and the view attributes that are associated with that. So in order to get to one of these save views, we'll simply double click on it. And you'll notice down here in the bottom left, this is typical for all tools. It gives you directions. So attach save view. Now it's saying select view. Well, you know, we had discussed it could be multiple views turned on. So it's wanting you to just click in the view window. So in this case, we're going to only just click in our view 1 window. And you can see it brings up a certain view. Now these views are still, you can still rotate around and navigate in these views. So we'll go ahead and locate our center point for our rotation. And you can see it's still just as functional as the other model. It's not like it's a 2D clip or anything. It's just we tried to orientate the views for you. Here's just another view of the abutment plan. We have elevation set up. We have different field splices shown in terms of the piers. We have different views associated with the piers. Some views were created with clip volumes, and I actually just clicked on one with a clip volume, so we'll go ahead and do that again. If they are created with a clip volume, you'll notice there's a clip in the name of the save view name. And what a clip volume is in Pro Structures, which is the program we use to create this model, you can actually cut sections of elements to get a better viewpoint on some information or some of the elements. So in this case, we wanted to cut right down the middle of the pier so we could more clearly see the rebar that was in it. So here you can see if we zoom in, it just allows us to take measurements in terms of spacing and to help visualize what's all in the pier a little better. go into a couple other clip views. So here you can see that we've clipped the top of the footing so you can see the piles in the pile embedment. So that's the summary of save views. The next tab you'll see up here is links. Now, because this is a federated file and all the files are being referenced into this one, we really don't have any way to access the links through this tab, so it's really not useful for you. Next, I want to discuss the view attributes. And the view attributes tool is located next to the view previous and view next. We'll hover over it, you can see view attributes. First, let me go back to our bridge isometric view. It's always a good starting point for this. So, view attributes. Let's go ahead and open that up and take a look at what you can do in there. First thing you're going to see here or on top is the display style. So you can view the model and view the elements with different transparencies and illustrations. So here we're looking at the illustration ignore lighting view. That's what I typically like to use. It seems to be the best visualization display style. But you can see there's a long list of display styles included. Some of the better views or better display styles that we found, one's wireframe. So what we'll do is actually go down there, select wireframe, and then we'll click in our view. Again, you can see the directions, select view. And that changed from illustration to a wireframe. And that allows you to see through the elements. All it does is highlights the boundaries of the elements. We can also go to a transparent view, which adds some transparency to the elements, but again, you can still see through those elements. So if we look at the piers, you can see the concrete is kind of a light gray, but we can see all the rebar within that concrete element. And we also have smooth. It doesn't highlight the edges of the elements like the illustration ignore lighting does. So we'll go back to the illustration ignore lighting. So as far as these other buttons go, ACS Triad, you can leave that on or off. It's up to you. I typically leave it off. Background's not important. Clip volume's not important. For the most part, you can leave the default settings as soon as you open the program. All of these will be turned on or off, and you really don't have to mess with them. The one that's going to be important is the markers, and we'll talk about that when we discuss links, but that'll allow us to see what elements have links attached to those. So we'll come back and turn that one on. Next, we're going to talk about the element selection dialog. So this is kind of what I always refer back to when I'm not using a specific tool. It allows you to select certain elements. So we'll go ahead and right click or left click, and you can see by selecting the element, it highlights that element. Now there's different ways you can select. If you have the two tools or two boxes on the far left of this toolbox selected, and I want to select a new one, you can see it's only going to select the one that you click on, and it'll unselect everything else. One way around that is if we hold down our left mouse key and drag to the left, you can see that we're getting a box that is kind of has dashed lines around it. If we release the mouse key, it's going to select all the elements that were even partially within that box. So we'll go ahead and select out of here and unselect those elements. If we do a right selection or create a right box, again by holding down the mouse key, you can see that the boundary of that box is not dashed. We'll go ahead and do the same, approximately the same box, and nothing was selected. By going to the right, the elements have to be fully within that box. So because the piles are sticking up below and above that box, it's not going to give us that selection. There are other options to select other than this one. We have a block selection again, which is similar to what we had just used. A shape. And we also have a line selection. So that one would basically allow you to just draw a line, and anything going through that line should be selected. So we'll go back to this one. So I was showing you as I click each element, it unselects the element I had selected previously. Now, in order to select multiple elements without holding down the control key, that is one option. If I have this one selected, I hold down control. I can also select other elements. I can also make that combination with the box. So let's go ahead and just left click that element. I'll hold down control and I'll go ahead and make a box with the rest of these elements. And you can see that was all added to my original selection. So this add function essentially allows you to add additional elements without holding onto that control key. So you can see as I select them, it doesn't unselect the original selection as I had shown previously. Same goes for subtract. It basically allows you to take out selected elements. So you can see that they're unhighlighted as I go through those. Invert and clear I don't really use. Next, we're going to talk about element information. Now, this is really where the power of the BIM model comes in. And in order to access that, we're going to go up. First, let's go back to our element selection and make sure that we're back to our far left selections. So to get to element information, there's a little eye icon up here. We'll go ahead and select that. And we'll go ahead and dock off to the left side of our screen here. And you can see it automatically resizes that view. And we'll drag it out so we can see a little more of the element information. So in order to get something to pop up here in the element information, we're going to go ahead and select, we're going to use a pile as an example. If I select the pile, you can see kind of a wealth of information that pops up. The width of the pile, the length, what material it is, the weight in pounds, the volume in inches cubed, and so on and so forth. We have batter angle in there. Does it require an uplift anchor? No. And how far is it embedded into the concrete footing itself? A foot. So it's a good way to access that information by simply selecting the elements. Here we're selecting a bottom flange of one of our girders. And you can see the description. Section 4, girder D, bottom flange. Unfortunately, the number of decimals is kind of long, but that's just the way the program produced the data. We have materials, we have the bit item name, bit item code. We have bit item name, bit item code for, I believe, every element in here. So you should be able to tell what bit item that goes with. The thickness of the plate, the length of the plate, and the volume, as well as the surface area and some other properties. And again, that each element has information assigned to it all the way down to the bolts. So here you can see more information. We're a couple of different ways we can place that barrier I have selected up here. Cast in place or slip form, bit item name, bit item code, as well as volume. Now, if I go back to the piles and I want to see kind of what information is the same with these piles on pier, I believe this is 7A. What you can do is go ahead and select all those piles. And let's go ahead and move this dialog box out of the way. If the element information is the same for all the elements you have selected, you're going to get that element information showing up. So the width, you can see we have a value. The length, we have a value. So that's constant for all of these. If the element information varies across the elements, you're going to get the vary sign here, or varies text. So you know that within your selection group, you got a couple of different weights. As far as weight goes, there's probably a very slight difference, so it's throwing a varies in there. Same with net volume and surface area. But batter angle, for example, obviously there's some that are battered and some that are not, so it's giving you the vary symbol. So we'll unselect that. One thing I do want to also go over is the rebar. So let's get to a view showing rebar. Let's go to Pier 6A cap rebar. And go back to our element selection tool. And we'll go ahead and select a rebar set. Now, unfortunately, this is just the way the program creates the data for rebar. You see a lot of duplicated information, bar size, grade, bar size, grade, bar size, grade. Well, that's because we have a set of rebar selected, and it's giving you element information for each one of those bars within that set. So you can see the number of bar size grades in here is going to be equal to the number of bars that you're seeing here. And in some cases, it's actually duplicated beyond that. So we tried to cut out a lot of the information that you wouldn't need. And this is kind of as refined as we could get it. So we still do have bar weights, bar lengths, the quantity of the bar. That's why we're showing up a quantity of 1, because it's only talking about one of the bars within that set. So if I click on just a single bar, you can see the element information shows up a little shorter. We'll click on some other bars here. Bar quantity 1. Again, we have the bit item code, bit item names in there, as well as the bar marks. Next, I want to talk about the item browser. So in order to access the item browser, we go up to File, Item Browser. So the item browser is essentially a centralized location for all the element information that we were just showing. All the information that's stored in the model is accessible through here. So we'll go ahead and dock this to the left of our element information. And again, we'll move this. Go back to our bridge isometric view. Okay, so the item browser, just to clarify, this is the element information dialog, but I'm gonna kind of use both of them to show what's all included in the item browser itself. So item browser, if we drop down the active file, you'll see a long list of information with further drop downs. Now, these names correspond with that element information that we were showing. So let's go ahead and select a pile. And let's get out of this for now. You can see the title of these drop downs, element info pile, correspond with what's shown in your item browser. So we also have an element info pile in the item browser. Now, if we go to a footing, for example, element info pier footing. So it's a little bit different. It varies based on the type of element that we're looking at. So element info, let's find it, pier footing. So there you go. So All the elements, again, correspond with this information. We could keep clicking through and finding different ones, and ultimately we'd see that all of them are included here. One thing I did forget to point out with the element information is outside of this general, and then typically the name is element info something. You don't really need these. Well, you can use the links, which we'll talk about later, but the raw data, the extended, the material are really not applicable. That just is carried through when we produce the model. Okay, so back to the item browser. One tool within the item browser is the search tool. And where that's going to be most useful, again, you can use it for anything, but I'm going to use it for searching for a bar mark, for example, because the bar marks are just labeled, they all kind of have the same alpha code. So there gets to be a lot of bar marks and they're difficult to group within the model. So let's first find a bar mark that we want to search for. So we'll go to Pier 6A cap rebar. Now, let's say you were to get a bar mark or get a set of bars in the field and it had a bar mark tag to it. You would read that bar mark and you could do the same process we're doing here. If, for example, the bar mark was, let me click on this, 11A1, what we would do, let's unselect that, is go up here in the item browser and search. So what do we want to search for? Same drop-down list that we're seeing in the item browser. And actually, I can show you. So what's the name? Element info rebar. So I know I'm searching within the element info rebar name. So we'll go search. We'll find element info rebar because we know that's where my bar mark information is stored. We're searching for bar mark. What's it equal to? It's equal to 11A1. We'll go ahead and add that to our search. You can see it shows up down here. We'll hit OK. And that search is created on the bottom of our element information list. And we'll go ahead and hit the little plus button off to the left here, to the left of the search. And you can see a bunch of different elements show up. These are all the 11A1 bars. So this is any element that has an 11A1 bar mark to it. Now, some other useful tools, if we just highlight the search and we want to isolate or highlight that bar, we'll simply go up here and hit highlight. And you can see it highlights the bar within the model. Now, it's important to note that you need to have the rebar turned on in order for it to highlight. There are also 11A bars. I just happen to know there's 11A1 bars associated with this other pier as well, pier 7A, but it's not showing that because I don't have that that pier turned on. So just to show you, if we go back to the model, pier 7A, and we turn on the A bars, you can see that that's highlighted too, but it wasn't showing up because it wasn't turned on. So what I would do if I were searching for rebar, I would probably go through and turn all of my rebar on, the deck, the barrier, all the pier and abutment reinforcing before I do that highlight. And then you'll know that your bar is going to show up. We can also zoom to that bar. So let's go ahead and turn off that rebar. And let's say I'm out in space. Up here, we'll go to zoom. And again, it's zooming to the extents of whatever was selected. So it's kind of centering pier 6 and 7A, but 7A was turned off. So if there were only one bar or if, for example, this was the only 11A1 bar, it would zoom right into that bar. We also can isolate the bar by going up here to isolate, and that will turn everything off. Regardless if there are other elements on that level, it's going to just show the elements that you have selected. Now to get out of that, we'll simply unselect these. So we turn off our isolate, we'll turn off our zoom, and we'll turn off our highlight. Now another powerful tool feature within the item browser is the details tool. I believe this opens up automatically when you open the item browser, but to open it back up, go ahead to the details and select that. So this is basically the element information in kind of an Excel format. So let me go back to my bridge ISO again in the Views tab. And let's go ahead and select an element. So we'll just select the bottom flange here. And you can see that the details update with the element that you have selected. So with this element, there are actually 3 different element names that are associated with it. And that makes up what you see in the element information dialog. The girders are one of the few elements that are like this. Most will only have 1 line. Let me try clicking on piles. Okay, so piles do actually have 2 as well. The height and the length was actually created by the program, as well as the volume and shape size. This was actually input manually by the designer. So you can see that the information pops up just like it does in the element information dialog box. Now we can also access the information instead of selecting elements within the view. Let's just go ahead and select, let's go to element information, OBM data, girder segment, for example. Any element that has this information associated with that is going to populate or show up, and it's going to show all the element information that you would see in the element information dialog. So we have the modulus, we have the start and end widths in feet, as you can see here. So 1.5 feet, 2 feet. We have the length of each segment, what type of segment it is, bottom flange, top flange, webs, and so on and so forth, thickness. Now we can do this with any information. So here you can see if I select element info rebar, it's showing all the rebar element information. So there's a lot that you can scroll through, the bar marks, bar quantities, plates. So it's a good way to access the information in a spreadsheet format. If we wanted to actually copy that out, there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can either select an individual row, and once I have it selected, I right click and I can copy that and paste it into Excel. I can also select here in the top left box. It automatically selects everything. Again, I can copy that out. Now, another way to search for elements is, let's say I want to search for, let me go back to a girder here, girder segment. I want to search for this bottom flange. So what I'll do is select it. And now that I have it selected, I'm going to go up here and say highlight. And let's actually go to zoom. So there you can see that that piece of information is assigned to this element, and it basically highlights that element for us. So if there's something that you're interested in, such as well, what's over 40 feet, what segment's 40 feet long, we'll simply just zoom into that. And if you don't turn these off as you click around, it's going to keep bringing you to different parts. So you can see my view shifting slightly as I go through these. Well, that's because these are still turned on. So be sure to turn those off if you're wanting to get back to um, just your basic view. So that's pretty much the item browser summary. I believe we've covered most of this. Item display settings we really don't mess with. Everything else has been addressed. Next thing I want to talk about is measuring. So we'll go ahead and just get out of the item browser altogether. And we'll go ahead and isolate a pier. So let's go to pier 6A cap, for example. Now, we are not providing any dimensions for the piers themselves, so dimensions actually need to be pulled from the model. So in order to do that, we'd go up here to our measure icon, and you can see there's actually a little arrow on the bottom right. That's pretty standard for Bentley View. If you see that arrow, it typically means that if you hold down your left mouse button, there's other tools within that toolbox. And usually you can open those up as their own separate toolbox. This case I didn't. Again, you can dock that if you want. Actually, let's just do that. So let's open that up as a toolbox. And you can see there's different functions. So let's measure a distance. So let's click the distance. And I want to measure the length or width of this pier cap, for example. So I will snap to a point on the corner of the pier cap to the other side. And you can see here I have a distance that's showing up as 5 feet. Now the true distance accounts for the distance along the line regardless of whether it's changing elevation. The projected distance only accounts for the horizontal projected distance. So again, let's give an example of that. Let's measure the length of our footing. So the 2 points I'm selecting are at the same elevation, so the true and projected distances are the same. One thing to note, the SF actually stands for survey feet, so it is a distance measurement. It's a little confusing because some may think that's surface or square feet, but it actually stands for survey feet. So if we measure 2 points at different elevations, you can see that my true distance is measured along that diagonal, and my projected distance was the same as it was when we measured 2 points at the same elevation. So that may be useful to you when you're doing your measuring. So pretty simple with the measure distance. We can also go to measure radius, and we can actually select different radii on the pier cap. So here we have kind of an aesthetic curve. If we just hover over it and select it, you can see there's a radius and a diameter given. And we can do that for different measurements. So let's do that here. You can see again the radius is 10.427 survey feet and a diameter of double that. We can measure angles. Again, measure lengths. I believe if you select an element. So instead of picking 2 points, I'm just going to select this line, and the same as we measured before, it's given us a length of 5 survey feet. We can measure area. So if I select this guy, it's going to give us the area of the entire element. So here we're at 1128 square survey feet. So that's where you're going to see the square survey feet instead of the SF. Again, the footing we can measure surface area on. And we can do this on any element, not just the piers. I'm just using the pier as an example because it's easier to isolate. And we can measure volumes. So let's go to the pier cap, cubic survey feet. We're at 1544. We can do it for the footing. We can also do it for the pile. Let's go to the bridge. We can also do it for, again, any element. Let's go to the bottom flange, 5.77 cubic survey feet. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the AccuDraw. Now we turn that on initially using the F11 key or the key-in, that key-in AccuDraw activate. When that's typed in there and you hit enter, it turns on this little dialog box. Now this is the only way that you're going to be able to see coordinates. And since this model is coordinate correct, it is very useful when you're hovering around to see where you're at and what you're snapping to. So if I wanted to measure an elevation, for example, let's go back to our pier. What I typically like to do is select a tool that allows me to snap to certain elements. And again, we'll talk about a little more detail on these snaps soon, but snaps are basically these little yellow X's that identify key points or breakpoints in the element. So if I hover over that and you look down in the bottom left here at the elevation, you can see that that actually changes based on the snap point. So if I want, what's the elevation of the corner of my cap here? Well, if you look down on the bottom left, we're at 769.481. I want the other elevation, the elevation of the other side of the cap, 770.909. We can also get to the elevations by simply, let's say I wanted to, during the measurement process, I measured a couple of lengths. There's this little drop down. If we drop that down, it gives you a little further breakdown of your measurement. Well, what was your start point, the X, Y, Z coordinate, and what was the end point? So if I wanted a couple of, let's start the measurement tool over. I wanted to snap first measurement point, second measurement point. Again, you can see my first point is at 770.91 and second point 769.48. Another very useful feature of AccuDraw is the ability to lock the direction you're measuring in. So in order to do that, this is basically the AccuDraw tool or toggle or whatever you want to call it. And it's showing you the direction it's wanting to measure in. So it kind of wants to snap to the green is the y-axis and the red is the x-axis. It's easy to measure along those because it wants to snap to those. So in order to change the direction or orientation of this, we can hit the R button. And if we hit the R button, you can see down here in the lower left, we have a little toolbox that shows up. And it's showing all of them that are associated with R. So RE, if we typed in RE, it's going to rotate that ACS about an element that you select. So let's go ahead and do that. So there I selected my first point and I'm typing in RE. Now, again, with the directions on the bottom left, it's saying select element to define rotation. So I want to select the edge of the pier. So you can see that my x-axis of my AccuDraw is now orientated with that pier. Now, in order to lock that, let's say I wanted to measure something. Let's get a better example at first. Let's go ahead and lock. Let's start a measurement here. Again, I'm going to go RE and I'm going to lock my AccuDraw so it aligns with the footing. Now once I'm set along the x-axis, it's that dark gray, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Now you can see that my measurement is actually locked in that direction. And I want to take a measurement from the edge of the footing to center line of pier cap, for example. You can see it's kind of showing a dashed line, but it's only going to give you the measurement of the dark gray line. So we'll go ahead and measure that, and you can see it's 9 feet. So this is the measurement it's giving you. So it's very useful if you want stations, for example. We actually do have a level in here called framing plan. We'll go ahead and find that, framing plan 2D. That framing plan 2D is actually located at elevation 0. So let's go to view extents, and this is actually a couple of tools that I forgot to mention about. View or fit view actually will zoom into everything that's turned on. So if I have something at 0, it zooms me out. If I turn this off, it's going to zoom me back into the pier. We can also zoom with the window area. So back to what I was talking about. If we want to take a measurement to the station line, we actually have stations on this framing plan 2D. And I want to measure, let's go to a top view. And let's actually go to a wireframe as well. This is my station line. I could simply measure over to that station by locking my ACS in that direction and selecting on the station line. So that's another measurement that you can make. So let's go back to our bridge isometric. Sometimes this does get stuck open. If that does happen, just go ahead and right click and it move around a little bit and it will disappear. So, back to our save view. Here we go. Bridge ISO, and we're back. So that's pretty much a summary of the measurement tool and how you measure stuff, as well as the AccuDraw. Now, rotate to element wasn't the only thing that you could use with the AccuDraw. As you probably saw previously, once I hit R, there are a lot of different things you can rotate. You can rotate your x-axis. So let's, by simply going RX, you can see there it flipped 90 degrees, or RY. RY or RZ. All that can be done as well as other options, and you can look at those on your own time as well. Next, we're going to talk about the auxiliary coordinate system. Now that is accessed through this icon on the top, auxiliary coordinates, and we'll go ahead and open that up. We've set up a few auxiliary coordinate systems because you can not actually create your own within the free Bentley view. We had to go ahead and set these up in ProStructures when we created the model. So in order to turn on a certain auxiliary coordinate system, we'll go to Pier 6A, for example, and we'll double click it, and you can see it's highlighted in dark green. In order to change it, we'll just double click on something else, and it actually shows up here the current auxiliary coordinate system. Now where that's beneficial is if we go here to settings, locks, ACS plane, and we make sure this is checked on, this changes what the top, the front, the right view are all orientated with. So let's go to the Pier 6A cap again. Let's make sure that our auxiliary coordinate system is set to Pier 6A. And let's go to a top view. So now this is not north. This is orientated now with whatever auxiliary coordinate system we are. The north is actually off to the left here somewhere. But it allows us to just orientate the pier with our view. And we can go to different views. We got the front view. We got our side views. So we did this for each pier as well as the abutment, just to make it a little easier for visualization. And really that's the primary benefit and really the only benefit of those. In order to get back to the global coordinate system, we'll just go ahead and select one of these. This first one, the 000, the NAD 1983 state plane coordinate system. And we'll get back here. Now, if we go ahead and do a top view, the top of the screen is pointing to true north. Lastly, I want to talk about links. This is very important in terms of the information within the model. So we'll go back to the bridge isometric. And like I mentioned earlier, within the view attributes, there's actually a little toggle. So we'll turn the markers on. So we'll simply select them and we'll go ahead and exit out of there. And you can see there's a bunch of icons that show up within the model. And it's basically identifying each piece of linked information. Now, for some reason, the icons are showing up. My PDF must be referring to Internet Explorer, which may cause some issues as I'm doing this. But in order to access these links, let's go to the model orb, for example. The model orb is obviously not part of the model, or not part of the structure, but it's something that we use to store locations of general information. That's a lot of the information that you'd see on the front sheets of a traditional 2D plan set. So if we select that, you can see that we have a lot of information assigned to that, the owner, a lot of the general information with the bridge. It also has links assigned to it. If I just hover over that and you look at that information, it says links to. So we have 7 different links. Now, there's a couple of different ways I can open those links. I can go to, if I hover over the flag itself, I can click Open Link. And here you can see it opens up the sheet link. So we'll go ahead and get out of that one. Sometimes it's a little easier to go to a wireframe view when you're looking at links, just because you can see all the different links that are associated with that a little better. It doesn't get hidden by the element itself. So again, let's go and you can, sometimes it stacks them and it's a little more difficult to select, but we can just go to, if I hover over, this pops up, then I'll select Open Link. I can also access them by selecting the element. There we go. And if I hold down my right mouse button, Open Link, and if I'm still holding down my left, or my right mouse button, excuse me. If I let that go on one of these, let's say General Notes, and I select it with the left button, it's going to open up General Notes 2. So there's 3 different pieces of, or 3 different types of links that we have in here. We have a website links. One of them is to the standard specifications on Iowa DOT's website. We have PDF links, which are in that sheet format, like you saw in the last one I just opened up. And we also have Excel links. Now, Excel links we've included for a lot of the tabular information that you would see on a 2D plan set. So let's go ahead and open up one of them. I believe this is the camber and haunch spreadsheet. So here you can see that information is now included in a spreadsheet format, which is a lot more useful than uh, just seeing it on a 2D plan set itself. You can copy this out into other spreadsheets or do whatever you want with it. And there's different tabs here. We have camber, we have the figure associated with that, deflection ordinates, and the field haunch data. Now we have the same thing for the top of slab elevations, and then the bridge deck grade adjustment spreadsheet we've also set up for this model. And we'll also go ahead and click on the standard specification website. And you can see it brings you right to the standard spec. I believe the links also show up in the element information. So if we have an element selected, I can see the links here. And I believe I can open those up through here. Okay, maybe not. But it at least allows you to see what links it has associated with it. So that pretty much covers all the tools available in Bentley View and all that are really needed to extract information out of the model. If you need any additional help, you can always go to the Help menu, located up here, Help Contents, and search for any of the tools you're working with, and it'll give a pretty good description of what the tool can do. That concludes our tutorial on Bentley View.